Viewer discretion is advised.
If anyone ever tells you you're not allowed to read a book, you should immediately read that book. For centuries, a mysterious manuscript known as the Book of Enoch remained hidden from the world, excluded from the Bible, labeled as heresy, and nearly forgotten altogether. Discovered again in the late 1700s after centuries of obscurity, this ancient text contains vivid accounts of beings known as Watchers, giants known as the Nephilim, and extraordinary journeys beyond the earth itself. Their children were giants, their legacy, chaos. But were these the monsters of myth or the offspring of a forgotten age? While some dismiss it as mythology, others believe it documents real historical events that early religious authorities preferred to keep hidden.
Some people will tell you this book is pure myth and that you should just ignore it.
Others will swear by it, convinced it tells the real reason the earth was flooded and destroyed. All depends on who you ask. If this book is just a piece of fantasy fan fiction, then why did the church want it removed so badly?
Every ancient myth starts to make sense the moment you stop treating it like fiction.
Call them angels, call them aliens. I don't think they cared what we named them.
The only thing you need to remember is,
If the truth was harmless, it wouldn't need to be buried.
The text we call 1 Enoch started life in the southern Levant, Judea or Samaria, sometime between about 300 and 100 BC. It was composed in Aramaic, the street language of Second Temple Judah, and later copied into Ge'ez, classical Ethiopian, which is why the complete version survived only in Ethiopia. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove it circulated at Qumran by 200 BC, so it was already considered important by a separatist priestly community before the New Testament era. No single author signed it. Scholars see at least 5 distinct booklets: Book of Watchers, Book of Parables, Astronomical Book, Dream Visions, Epistle of Enoch, that were stitched together over a century or so. Each section looks like the work of a different priest-scribe group, all claiming to preserve the testimony of the patriarch Enoch, 7th from Adam. The stories themselves are older than the pages. References in Genesis, Jubilees, and even older Mesopotamian flood lore hint that a pre-exilic oral cycle, possibly 2nd millennium BC, was already circulating about a sky-taken patriarch who learned the secrets of heaven. By the time scribes finally pressed stylus to parchment, they were capturing material that had been recited around campfires for well over 1,000 years. Genesis 5 gives Enoch a single, tantalizing line. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis 6 follows with the cryptic episode of the sons of God, the daughters of men, and the birth of giants. 1 Enoch plugs itself right into that gap, expanding the one-verse disappearance into a full narrative of watchers, hybrids, and celestial journeys.
They were called the fallen ones, the giants. Genesis 6:4 says it straight. There were giants in the earth in those days.
when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, a bloodline, a hybrid lineage.
And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit.
You see what Azazel hath done.
who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed to the children of men the eternal secrets which were in heaven, which man was striving to learn. Semjaza also hath taught enchantments, root-cuttings, mania, and astrology, policy makers, and the 12 constellations, and the signs of the zodiac, and the months, and the weeks, and the years. You saw what they saw, in that they transgressed Father's command. Bind Semjaza and Azazel in the pits of the earth, and cast them into darkness, and deliver them into the hand of the angels of chastisement until the day of judgment. And afterward I came unto them, and they were all sitting down weeping in Abel's jail, with their faces covered. And I recounted before them all the visions which I had seen in sleep, and I began to speak the words of righteousness, and to reprimand the heavenly watchers.
The Book of Enoch is a problem for religion, a problem for science, a problem for anyone trying to hold together the official timeline of human history. It talks about the descent of powerful beings from the sky, not in metaphor, literally. It names them. It says where they landed. It tells you what they did, what they taught, and what happened because of it. It's specific. It reads like someone trying to document contact with beings who operated under a chain of command, had advanced knowledge, and broke the rules by giving that knowledge to early humans. 200 angels, referred to as the Watchers, or eerily in Aramaic, were assigned to observe humanity. Their leader was Semjaza, and his second in command was Azazel. At some point, the Watchers made a decision. They were attracted to human women. They conspired together and swore a blood oath. They would descend to earth, take wives for themselves, and father children. They came down on Mount Hermon, made their agreement, and began the plan. By doing this, they broke divine law. Once on earth, the Watchers not only mated with humans, but they taught them things they weren't supposed to know. Each Watcher brought forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught humans how to forge weapons, armor, and mirrors. Semjaza taught enchantments and root-cutting, sorcery, and herbalism. Others taught astrology, the movement of the stars, lunar cycles, signs, and omens. Essentially, they gave humanity tools of technology, warfare, and occult practice, tools that accelerated civilization but also led to corruption, violence, and imbalance. The children produced by the Watchers and human women were called the Nephilim, giants, dangerous, violent, and uncontrollable. They devoured human food supplies, then turned to humans themselves. Their existence threw Earth into chaos. According to Enoch, they also corrupted animals, possibly through hybrid breeding or genetic manipulation. The cries of humanity reached the higher heavens. The archangels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel, intervene. God commands them to act. The Nephilim are to be destroyed, and the Watchers are to be punished severely. The giants are killed, many by each other, others by the flood that follows. The Watchers are bound in chains and cast into the abyss, often interpreted as the underworld or a subterranean prison. Azazel is singled out. His name becomes tied to sin itself in later traditions. Enoch, the human who witnessed it all, is taken by the angels. He documents the whole saga, delivers warnings, and is then taken into the heavens. The story ends with the earth cleansed, the Watchers bound, the giants dead, and humanity given another chance.
The Bible calls them the sons of God. But who were they? Ancient Mesopotamian texts describe the Anunnaki. Within their ranks was a faction known as the Igigi, Watchers. We hear about them again in Numbers 13 when the Israelites scout Canaan. What they find terrifies them. A race of giants, the Anakim, descendants of the Nephilim. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, the text says, and so we were in theirs. The Israelites encountered not just the Anakim, but also the Zamzumim, the Emim, and other tribes of giants.
These were giants, rulers, warriors, architects of fortified cities.
And every time the pattern repeats, they're wiped out. No prisoners, no warnings, total destruction. Yahweh doesn't just command conquest, he commands eradication. But the question is why? Why was it so important to erase this story completely?
What kind of knowledge gets buried for thousands of years? And who decides what truths are too dangerous to preserve?
By the 2nd century BC, Enoch was already in wide use. It was highly respected by Jewish sects like the Essenes, who preserved multiple copies at Qumran, found centuries later among the Dead Sea Scrolls. That makes it older than much of the Bible. Early Christians knew it too. The Epistle of Jude, written in the 1st century AD, quotes it directly from Enoch 1:9. It was citation. But that changed in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, when Christianity aligned itself with Rome. Once the empire legalized and then adopted Christianity, doctrine became political, and the Book of Enoch didn't fit. Around 363 AD, the Council of Laodicea listed the books approved for public reading. Enoch was left out. By 397 AD, the Council of Carthage helped finalize the canon used by the Latin Church, and Enoch was nowhere in it. Key figures like Jerome, Augustine, and Athanasius all excluded it. It was considered too strange, too heretical, or too dangerous. Meanwhile, in Judaism, Enoch was also rejected. After the fall of the Second Temple in 70 AD, Jewish leadership shifted to Yavne. There, the foundations of the modern Hebrew Bible, the Masoretic text, were set in motion. Enoch didn't survive that process either. By the 5th century, the Book of Enoch had vanished from the West. Only Ethiopia kept it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian communities on earth, preserved Enoch in their canon. Their version, written in Ge'ez, remained untouched for over 1,000 years. It wasn't until 1773, when Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with copies of the manuscript, that the West saw the Book of Enoch again. Scholars were stunned. What they thought was a myth turned out to be real, and older than much of the Bible itself. Ethiopia was one of the very first regions on earth to adopt Christianity. The Kingdom of Aksum, one of the great powers of the ancient world, made Christianity its state religion around the year 330 AD, long before most of Europe. But the seeds were planted even earlier. According to tradition, Christianity came to Ethiopia through a Syrian Christian named Frumentius, who survived a shipwreck and rose to prominence in the Aksumite court. Eventually, he was appointed bishop by the Patriarch of Alexandria. The Ethiopian church didn't emerge from Rome. It came from Alexandria, the same city that housed one of the largest Jewish populations in the ancient world. It was a hotbed of mystical texts, apocalyptic writings, and early Christian experimentation. That's likely how the Book of Enoch arrived in Ethiopia, carried south by Egyptian Jews and early Christians sometime between 300 BC and 100 AD, through trade and religious migration. They canonized it, while the rest of the Christian world rejected it. It became part of the Ethiopian Bible, copied and studied in Ge'ez, where it remains to this day.
A kingdom with ties to Solomonic bloodlines, preserving a forbidden book about angels and hybrid giants.
Following a version of Christianity untouched by Rome. Ethiopian Christianity is steeped in apocalyptic texts. The Book of Enoch fits perfectly in that world, because in Ethiopia, it was never lost.
The second Book of Enoch didn't survive in Hebrew or Greek like other ancient texts. It was preserved only in Old Church Slavonic, tucked away in the archives of Eastern Orthodox monasteries for over 1,000 years. That alone is strange. Scholars believe it was written in the 1st century AD, possibly even earlier. Some argue it came from Alexandria, where Jewish and Egyptian traditions were already merging into something more mystical. But the version we have today comes from Slavic manuscripts passed down through the Eastern Church. In this text, Enoch is taken through 10 heavens, guided by glowing beings, shown the mechanics of creation, time, judgment, and cosmic order. He sees angelic forges, celestial cities, and vast storehouses of knowledge. He's given a tour of the structure behind reality. It describes the Grigori, or Watchers, as a fallen order. It talks about the creation of angels. And at the end, Enoch is changed, transformed into a luminous being and given the name Metatron. No mainstream religious tradition kept this book. Not Judaism, not the Catholic Church. It didn't make the cut at any major council, but it survived, barely copied by monks who may not have fully understood what they were preserving.
If you read Enoch through the lens of ancient alien theory, it suddenly makes a lot more sense.
Because nearly every ancient culture tells the same story with different names.
In Mesopotamia, they were the Anunnaki who descended and mingled with humans. Some texts say they created us. Others say they ruled over us. Either way, they weren't from Earth. Alongside them were the Igigi, the Watchers of the Heavens, likely a lower rank, maybe a working class of Anunnaki. Then you've got the Apkallu, part man, part god, often shown with wings and fish-like robes, beings said to have brought knowledge after a flood. The Greeks called them Titans, a race of powerful giants who ruled before the Olympians. Later came the Gigantes, born from the blood of the sky itself. In Norse tradition, they show up as the Jotnar, the frost giants, ancient enemies of the gods, older than time, dwelling beyond the edges of the known world. The Asuras in Hindu tradition, same thing. Supernatural beings of immense stature and power. Some were noble, some were destructive. All of them were here before our current age. The Daityas, children of the Sky Mother Diti, were said to possess divine strength and battle against the gods themselves. Ancient Egypt had its own version. The Netru, divine ones who ruled before the pharaohs. Then the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. They were remembered as real beings who brought astronomical knowledge and ruled in a forgotten era. In China, they were the Dragon Kings, beings from the sky who came to rule and teach. In Japan, the imperial bloodline claimed direct descent from Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and the Tengu, celestial birdmen from the heavens. Everywhere you look, it's the same. Giants, star beings, knowledge bringers. The Lakota tell of red-haired giants who ruled the plains before the tribes arrived. The Cherokee and Hopi carry the same memory. Sky beings, tall and powerful, who eventually vanished or were destroyed. In South America, the Inca remembered the Viracocha, tall, pale-skinned, bearded strangers who brought language, agriculture, and architecture, then disappeared into the sea. In Africa, the Dogon knew of the Nomo, amphibious beings from the Sirius system. And the Zulu? They spoke of the Chitauri, serpent-like star beings who came from the stars and interfered with early human affairs.
Giants, star beings, ancient myths, tales whispered through time, hinting at truths beyond our grasp.
It's one thing to learn that giants may have walked the earth. It's another to realize that someone has spent centuries trying to make sure you never found out.
You've probably never heard a sermon about the Book of Enoch, and there's a reason for that. Because what it says changes everything.
Enoch, this human, was chosen by the Watcher's God to bear witness to things no one else had seen.
I went into the tongues of fire and drew nigh to a large house built of hailstones, and its wall was like a mosaic of hailstones, and its floor of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings. Between them, fiery cherubim. Its portals blazed with fire, and I entered in. It was as hot as fire and as cold as ice. Fear covered me, trembling took hold, and I fell upon my face. And lo, a second house greater than the former, its entire portal open, built of flames of fire. It excelled in splendor and magnificence beyond description. Its floor was of fire, above it were lightnings and the path of the stars. Its ceiling was flaming fire. I saw therein a lofty throne, crystal-like, its roundness like the shining sun. Cherubim surrounded it. From underneath it came streams of flaming fire. The great glory sat thereon, his raiment whiter than snow. None of the angels could behold his face.
And so one day, the angels came for him. These were shining beings, described with wings of fire, voices like rushing water, and faces too bright to look at. They lifted him off the earth, carried into the sky higher than the clouds, past the stars, until the world itself was gone beneath him. Enoch writes about traveling through portals of the heavens, massive crystalline gates in the sky. He describes a place of burning fire, thrones of light, geometries of glowing stone, and beings who seem to be made of energy itself. This sounds like either a spacecraft or another dimension. He is brought before the head of days, a supreme being seated on a radiant throne, surrounded by watchers and archangels. They show Enoch the foundations of the universe. They reveal the mechanisms behind time, weather, stars, and fate itself. He's shown the underworld, the abyss, and the prisons where the fallen watchers are held. He is shown the engines of reality. He returns briefly, glowing, altered, and delivers his warnings. He writes what he saw, and then he vanishes, taken permanently into heaven, or perhaps permanently off-world. The book of Genesis says it like this: Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No death, no tomb, no body, just gone. The book of Enoch says the watchers corrupted the animals too. Ancient translators struggled with the meaning, but once you read it through a modern lens, it's obvious. This sounds like genetic manipulation, crossbreeding, forced hybridization, bioengineering. Almost every ancient civilization had myths of chimeric beings, part animal, part human. In Egypt, Thoth, with the head of an ibis. Anubis, jackal-headed. In Mesopotamia, Lamassu, winged bulls with human faces. The Greeks had centaurs, minotaurs, satyrs. India had naga. China had dragon emperors, hybrid guardians, experimental creatures, biological tools, monsters. The earth was corrupted, morally and biologically. The Nephilim devoured everything. The hybrids defied nature. And when the cries of earth reached the higher realms, judgment came for the Watchers and for the corrupted world they left behind. The hybrids vanished, wiped out. So when people say the flood was about sin or violence, they're only half right.
In the late 1500s, a man named Dr. John Dee, mathematician, astrologer, spy for Queen Elizabeth, claimed he had made contact with angels. He said they spoke to him in a language no human had ever heard, a complex, structured tongue they called the true language of heaven. Dee called it Enochian, because these beings told him it was the same language once spoken by the prophet Enoch before the flood. Dee wasn't alone. His assistant, Edward Kelly, served as the medium. During their seances, Kelly would fall into a trance and dictate letters, words, and strange glyphs, often backwards or mirrored. Dee meticulously recorded it all. The result? A massive corpus of so-called angelic communication, filled with charts, 19-letter alphabets, magical squares, apocalyptic visions, and detailed instructions for summoning the entities behind it all. Modern linguists and codebreakers have studied Enochian. It has internal consistency, syntax, grammar, conjugations, rules that mimic real language. That's not something you make up in trance sessions. This was either a deeply encoded magical system, or Dee and Kelly were speaking with something real. Dee believed this language was older than Hebrew, older than Adam, and had been used by angels to create the universe. The Enochian system was later adopted by secret societies, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, the Golden Dawn, Thelemites. It became part of a magical operating system, designed not to worship these beings, but to communicate with them, through ritual, through sound, through language as a technology. And this raises the uncomfortable question, did John Dee rediscover a lost system of contact, or did something want to be found?
We're taught to believe the Book of Enoch was buried because it was myth. But maybe it was buried because it was real. And maybe someone didn't want humanity to remember the giants. Who decides what history gets taught in school?
The rabbit hole feels like there's no bottom. Yet deeper we descend.
Imagine a technologically advanced species arriving on Earth long before our cradle civilizations. Their giant offspring, hybrid by nature, might account for the legends of heroes and monsters in every corner of the globe. Their knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and medicine would have looked like magic to us, passed down in fragmented myths and mysterious artifacts.
What if these beings never truly landed on our plane, but slipped through thin spots between worlds? They could perceive time differently, move through realities we can barely conceive, and leave behind glimpses of their presence in dreams, visions, and the coded language of Enoch's parables. Their story became myth because society erased their memory, afraid of what their science could unlock. Could echoes of their lineage still linger in rare genetic markers or unexplained archaeological sites? Whatever the truth, the Book of Enoch dares us to ask bigger questions. Are we alone? Do other intelligences share our universe, visible or unseen? And if so, what will happen when, or if, they step back into our collective story?
Could ancient astronauts be hiding in plain sight? Do interdimensional doorways whisper of other worlds?
Or is the real mystery even stranger than we've dared to imagine?